Welcome to the Polish Podcast, a space dedicated to emboldening women in their faith and work. I'm your host, Jane Dorman. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to invite you to be part of our Polish community. Hit that like button and subscribe to our podcast to stay updated with our latest episodes. At Polish Network, we recognize that your work is more than just a job. It's a calling. That's why we're here to provide the connections, development, and spiritual nourishment you need to flourish. Each episode delves deep into topics that resonate with our Polish community. Join us as we hear from inspiring guests who share their unique perspectives and experiences as Christian women in the workplace. Well, no matter what brought you here today, we are thrilled to have you with us. Our aim is to ignite your passion and to empower you to excel on your leadership journey. So let's dive in and explore together. Well, friends, today's our final episode in our series on leading with enthusiasm. Can you believe it? Navigating this realm of leadership with you has made me realize how incorporating a sunnier disposition in my everyday life helps me grow into a more self-aware leader, which in turn keeps the pulse of my team's morale. Well, today's guest has a lot to say about this, and her name is Tiffanie Limbrick. Tiffanie is the Director of Licensing for RightNow Media, a resource that offers over 27,000 Bible study videos for churches and other organizations to use in small groups, personal study, or family devotionals.
My job for the company is to help find the content that goes on this platform and manage the relationships, the legal aspect of it, and shepherd that content onto the platform. And it is amazing because I get to sit in this seat and see the incredible work that God is doing through all these different people. And I just love it. I cannot speak highly enough of it.
Tiffanie is a lawyer by trade and has been one for over 10 years. Her journey to becoming a lawyer has taken her through a diverse range of organizations. She's worked with nonprofits helping people through the Boys and Girl Scouts and supporting volunteers at a domestic violence and rape crisis center. And when funding for her roles in these nonprofits ran out, she transitioned into sales, where she sold mattresses. This experience not only gave her a high opinion of what makes a great mattress, but also highlights the benefit of interacting with different types of people. This varied background eventually became the catalyst for her decision to become a lawyer.
I really had the opportunity to work with just a variety of different people because you had people from all walks of life coming in the door buying mattresses, but also just a variety of different type of people who made up my coworkers. And it was a very interesting job where I learned a lot about just people, just the different types of people. And so I really enjoyed that job. And I had a great boss who was a wonderful mentor. He made a mistake, though. He introduced me to his wife, who was a lawyer. Yeah. So as he was, prepping me and mentoring me to go into corporate and work with him there, his wife was in my ear and she was going, "Have you thought about law school? You should go take the LSAT. I think you'd be great at this." And I really started listening to her.
Yeah.
And so I was interviewing for a position with corporate and the LSAT was coming up. And I thought, you know what, let me just go try this. Because at the very least, I can go get a JD. It's like an MBA. I can come back to corporate and it'll give me a pay bump, and I can use my skills or my knowledge from the JD, just like an MBA. Mm-hmm. And I did good enough on the LSAT. I mean, not stellar, but good enough to get into a decent law school. So I go to law school instead of going into corporate, much to my mentor boss's chagrin. And in law school, I developed a passion for trial work. And I had this fantastic internship with the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I was like, I'm going to be a prosecutor. I am going to go in and I am going to put bad guys away. And I really wanted to work in the trafficking unit or in the child pornography unit because I thought these people were the worst of the worst. And It takes a special kind of character. And I thought at the time that I had that mentality where I could handle looking at those issues and that evidence and be able to handle those types of cases. Now looking back, I don't think that I have that kind of emotional wherewithal to do that. But in any event, so I was going to be a prosecutor. To work for the U.S. Attorney's Office, at least in Dallas, you can't go straight into the U.S. Attorney's Office. You've got to have a little bit of experience first. So you either get that experience through what they call Big Law, which is an international large law firm, or you go through the District Attorney's Office. I was able to get a job in Big Law. And so I ended up working in Big Law as a complex commercial litigator. And so that's what I ended up doing as a complex commercial litigator. Basically, I handled complex disputes with companies, typically business disputes. I also handled employment law disputes, securities transactional disputes, or securities litigation. And then I did a lot of internal investigations. So if a company had a concern that there was some kind of accounting issues or somebody was doing something wrong, but they weren't quite sure what that looked like, or they wanted to know who all was involved with the wrongdoing, they would hire me and my firm, and we'd come in and do our little investigation kind of behind the scenes to kind of weed out all the bad people and all that kind of good stuff. So I did that for about 8 years, and things in my life changed, and I became a single mom. And working on the litigation floor is very, very intense, very, very burdensome. You have to be on call, especially for the type of litigation that I was doing, which is very high stakes, high stress for the client and for the attorneys involved. And so I started looking for a different type of position. And I talked to my boss. I was very upfront with her because she was a great mentor as well. And she said, well, I'm going to keep you. I don't want you to leave. So she found a position within the firm in their in-house department. And so I became part of the general counsel for the firm. So my firm became my client. And I would advise the attorneys at the firm on issues of risk and ethics related to any kind of problems or questions that the firm was facing. And so I did that for about a year, until the opportunity for RightNow Media came along.
Before we continue, let's take a moment to share some opportunities for you to be part of the Polish Network. When we come back, Tiffanie and I will explore how creating a positive work environment can actually boost productivity through collaboration. So stick around for the details. Join us on October 18th in Carrollton, Texas for the Boldly Conference. This event is dedicated to your professional development as a working woman from a faith-forward perspective. At Boldly, we are faith-anchored, mission-driven, and boldly united. In a world marked by division, we're coming together in Christ around our conference theme, Unity. Unity isn't about uniformity or isolation. It's about embracing our differences, leveraging our unique strengths, and honoring diverse perspectives. We recognize that we are all essential parts of one body, each contributing something valuable. And this year, we're bridging the gap between sacred and secular, letting our faith guide our actions to make a lasting impact for the kingdom, united. Save the date, October 18th, 2024 at Bentry Bible Church in Carrollton, Texas. Don't miss out on early bird pricing too. That's available now through July 31st, so secure your spot today. Have you ever felt drained by a work environment that thrives on competition, where colleagues are pitted against each other rather than encouraged to collaborate? Yeah, me too. Embracing the idea of leading with enthusiasm, helps us understand this transformative power of creating a positive work environment. A lesson Tiffanie learned early on during her days in mattress sales.
When I was selling mattresses, one of our special projects was running our booths at the State Fair of Texas. Our company was actually the second largest sponsor at the State Fair of Texas.
Oh, wow.
As part of that, we got to sell mattresses at the State Fair. And you know what? We sold a lot of them out there. I mean,
are you serious?
Yeah.
People go to the State Fair to buy a mattress? That's so funny.
They're so tired from running around and chasing their kiddos. They lay down.
I guess.
This feels great. I need to take
that's hilarious. So funny.
Oh, man. And so the first year I was out there, I was just working the floor. And the environment out there, and it's not uncommon in a sales environment. It was very, very competitive. It was, pitting people against people, and this idea of I'm going to beat you, and that's going to motivate you to sell more. And so it was a kind of a negative environment.
Yeah.
And so the next year, I had the opportunity to manage the whole team, and it's a team of about 40 to 50 people. And at the same time, I was doing my honors thesis for my undergrad. And so I went to my boss and I said, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to run an experiment while I'm managing this project. And my whole thesis was that if I change the way the project is run and make it a more positive environment where we're not pitting people against each other, but rather looking at a more collaborative, team building, encouraging environment, I think it'll improve productivity and I think it'll improve profits at the end of the day, and that's really what the company cared about at the end of the day.
Right.
And so I really structured the way that we ran our morning meetings, the way that the team worked with each other, the way that we had our daily goals. We did have competitions, but the competitions weren't against each other necessarily. And so it was a much different environment that year than it had been in years past. And ultimately, my thesis was proven, and we were able to improve profits by 22% year over year. And it was just incredible. Absolutely incredible. And then on top of that, we had less burnout. I mean, the State Fair of Texas, for those of you not from here, it's a 27-day event. And it starts in the morning. We had to be there around 8:30 in the morning. It doesn't close until 9 or 10 at night.
Oh my gosh.
And most of our staff was there that entire time. And granted, we got breaks and all that kind of good stuff. But it was really labor intensive. And so if you have labor intensive plus a negative environment, people are going to burn out real fast. So this positive environment was less burnout plus profits. I mean, it's a win-win.
It is. It is a win-win for sure. Oh my goodness. That is so cool that you were able to prove that, to your bosses to say, hey, look, what does it look like to approach our work with more of a positive attitude, more collaboratively instead of this competition against each other. I always struggle with that. I always struggled with that in the works, the different jobs that I've experienced where it was like they tried to pit us against each other in competition. And I agree with you, and never just seemed to add up. Like, how is this supposed to help us move forward? Right. As opposed to like having this enthusiasm and this teamwork together. Let's work collaboratively together. And man, I think that your State Fair experience selling mattresses of all things, like, again, back to the mattress. I can't. I think that's so interesting to me. And I'm curious, in light of this idea of leading with enthusiasm and, you talked about this thesis and just the findings through your experience. How has that translated into the work that you do as the director of licensing at RightNow Media? How do you ensure your team shares that same enthusiasm or the same values when you deal with contractual negotiations or maintaining relationships with content providers. Could you give us some insight into that?
Absolutely. So one thing that I really strive to do is to encourage my team. And so I really so when I'm working with my team, I focus on approaching them with a very positive attitude. And I start with myself first. So I'm checking myself at the door and making sure that I'm taking care of myself. And that means getting good rest, making sure I've eaten, making sure that I've moved my body in some way. And listen, I'm not going to the gym. I'm a single mom with a little kid. I'd love to go to the gym, but it's not happening. But sure. Have I gotten up and moved around?
Facts. Yes.
Minimum effort here. Have I, spent some time with the Lord, which often looks like me praying in the car in between school drop off and getting to work in the 10 minutes, right? Again, we're just making it work. But yes. I'm taking care of myself, and I do make that a priority. And I really encourage anyone that I, interact with to do that too. And I encourage the people on my team to take care of themselves, set boundaries, hold them, and communicate those boundaries to me so that I can respect those boundaries and then help them hold them too. Mm-hmm. And then when interacting with content providers, so in my role, I have that primary relationship, but then some members of my team are interacting with them too. And I always tell them, you keep those relationships really positive. And if there is any issue with that content provider, you bring it back around to me. You don't have to handle that. That is not your job. I, as the lawyer, get to play pad cop. I'm the one who gets to bring up the contract terms and gently, kindly remind them, this is what you agreed to, all that kind of good stuff. And, fortunately, the great thing, especially about this job, is the frequency of that happening is so rare. But sometimes there's confusion, sometimes there's miscommunication, and that happens. The other thing that we do a lot is we just support each other. We communicate a lot. If someone needs help, it's a very open door. We've got Teams as our interoffice thing. We've got group messages. So, hey, I need help with this. Who's available? We're just very, very supportive of each other. And I think because of that, we're able to kind of create this very fostered, positive environment.
That's really encouraging to hear, especially hearing you as the leader in the specific role that you're at, taking the ownership where possible conflict could happen and saying, hey, you know what, if there's an issue, you can have them come talk to me and we'll talk it out because I have the background to inform them and why certain things can't happen or what have you. So I think that's encouraging to hear that there are leaders out there that take that ownership and as you're sharing just this idea that positivity, the way we approach our work with positivity and enthusiasm will increase that productivity with the team as a whole, not only through your work individually, but with the team collaboratively. And I just, I think that's cool. I think it's cool that you also lead by example, by, practicing self-care, like you said, doing my internal checklist of, okay, did I move my body? Did I eat something? Am I tired? Did I get enough sleep? And showing up, even just, the aspects of showing up for your family as well. And you had actually shared another hat that you have been able to put on, is that of a den mother for your son's scout pack, which I think is awesome. And kudos to you. I would not want to sign up for that role myself. I mean, how do you approach, I don't know, is this a role that you got voluntold to take or did you volunteer to take it? And if you, either way, how do you approach leading with enthusiasm in that role?
Yeah. So the Cub Scouts, it was one of those situations that, so he's a lion, which is the entry level for Cub Scouts,
Okay.
6-year-old.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And there were no other parents interested in volunteering. And
Oh,
so
boy.
it was one of those things that if no one was going to do it, and I was like, okay, we got to have to do it. And my son was looking at me going, please, mom, please, mom. And, when they do that, you have to say yes. I mean, you have to, right?
Yeah.
And I grew up being a Girl Scout, and my mom was my Scout leader. And so it just fell into place. And it's been a wild ride. I'm wrapping up my first year as the den leader, and it's kind of crazy. I only have about 8 lions, but it's 8 6-year-olds, right? And I am so thankful for all the kindergarten teachers out there, the precious people that God has blessed with the talent to take care of multiple 6-year-olds. That is not what I've been blessed with, but but we are surviving.
Yes. Surviving and thriving, leading those lions.
That's right. But, leading with enthusiasm is the only way to run one of these programs, because otherwise the kiddos are going to take you over, right?
Sure.
They're like little mobs. So now what's interesting for me is I'm actually a fairly introverted person.
Oh, interesting.
I have learned over the years through a lot of trial and error and a lot of crashing and burning that I have to be very intentional on how I enter meetings like this. And so I have to really mentally prepare myself before I'm about to go and spend an hour to an hour and a half of really being on and kind of like a cheerleader and singing and dancing and being silly and all the things you have to do to keep a group of 6-year-olds entertained. Yeah. So I really take the time to mentally prepare myself, psych myself up, and do all the things that I've got to do to get in the right headspace. And so I really the time before a Cub Scout meeting, I actually keep it pretty quiet in the house because I know it's about to get loud. And my son knows this. He knows, okay, this is the quiet time before the crazy starts. And then after the meeting is over, we have another period of quiet time. And again, my son is he knows mom's rhythms, and he's great about this. And it's another thing that I'm very intentional about. After the meeting is over, we clean up, we take some time, and right after the meeting is done, we don't immediately move into all the other things that we've got to do, because we know we've got to do homework. We know we've got to do all the getting ready for bed stuff. No, we know we're just going to go to bed late that night. We're going to take 20 minutes so that mom can decompress and calm down from all the crazy of having all those people in the house running around, not screaming, but making a lot of noise and all the kind of stuff. And it's very intentional. And it's so that I can be on for that hour and a half and really present with those kids and really leading them and teaching them all the values that we're imparting during that time, which I love to do. It just does take a lot out of me, and that's okay. That's okay.
And what I'm hearing is this understanding too of knowing your boundaries, knowing your margin, and communicating. As you were talking, all this spring semester, and this leading one of our polished chapters here, the different themes that we've been exploring of leadership, of leading with love and communication and care, and now enthusiasm. And it's kind of enthusiasm, I think, encompasses all of it. How can we love ourselves well? How can we love others well? How can we communicate well, not only to our teams, but to the teams that we lead in our households, maybe, and just I love that you communicated to your son, hey, look, mom needs a break. We all need to take a pause. So we're having quiet time. We're going to bookend these quiet before, quiet after, because that's what I need in order to show up as my best, most enthusiastic self. And I'm going to be so enthusiastic in this time that we're all together. And then we're going to take a pause, and we're going to move on to the next thing after that pause. And so I think that's really healthy for all of us to hear and to consider as we schedule our days, because I know it can be so easy to overschedule and kind of breach those boundaries that we try and set for ourselves, or maybe we don't set it as well. And I can see how that's all tied into this idea of leading with enthusiasm. Like those are key components to that, So as we like talk through this idea of leading with enthusiasm and embracing positivity in our leadership, is there any advice that you would give to aspiring leaders that are continuing to navigate this? Because I know this is a struggle for all of us at some degree. I know we all kind of struggle with this idea of, leading with enthusiasm, but just life happens. We face challenges. We deal with difficult situations in whatever industry that we're in. So like, how can we as aspiring leaders keep up this idea of leading with enthusiasm and faced with those things?
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's the one thing that is promised, right? That we are going to have challenges. And,
yes. Amen.
and you know what? And God is with us through those challenges. So at least we've got that, right?
Right.
So, it really comes back to, for me, it comes back to your attitude and your heart posture and how you face these things and really your intentions. So I do try my best to start with a positive attitude. And of course, that doesn't happen all the time, and that's okay. And that doesn't mean that I don't have my moments of venting, that I don't have my moments of wallowing and all of that. And I allow myself that, of course. I mean, even God tells us to lament, right? There's a whole book called Lamentations.
Yes.
And so we should absolutely be doing that and honoring that. But it is coming back to this idea of, okay, let's get back to the issue at hand. How can I live this positively? How can I take care of this? And so as far as practical tips, I do like to start out my day with a positive attitude and just really approaching, start my day out there. And then and the same thing if I have a problem, right? I do try to approach it positively with a solution-focused attitude, right? And so I really try not to focus too much on the why, at least not initially. Sometimes you do have to look at the why so that you can answer the question, like, how do I prevent this in the future, right? But I am really looking at it from a solution focus. Like, okay, we've got this problem. Let's focus on finding the solution to it. And that is, I believe, a more positive focused approach to a challenge or an issue. And so kind of using that positive kind of gratitude-like approach and listen, gratitude journals, gratitude practice, absolutely do it. I personally cannot get into the rhythm of doing that. Like I'm trying to get myself to do it, but it's just not my style. If you can do
That's
it,
okay.
Absolutely do it. But it's just not my personal thing. But it's really more of just kind of a positive attitude approach. When I'm managing my teams, I am really focused on expressing genuine gratitude for them. So I really and anytime I have a meeting, especially a one-on-one, I'm looking for an opportunity to say thank you, to praise them for their work. Especially if I have to give feedback that may not be so great, I'm looking for opportunities to here's what you did well, or here's what you're learning. And I really do view failures as an opportunity to learn. And so anytime I'm giving negative feedback, that's kind of the approach I take. I do like to tell them that I talk about them behind their back. And what I mean by that is that I'm talking positively about them behind their back. So I go out of my way to send an email to their boss or talk about them in a meeting and say, hey, this is this great thing that Jane did, and I really strive to make sure that my boss knows what this other person does. And here's the thing. Not only are you helping that person on your team, it also makes you look good as the manager because it means you're developing your people. So, bonus points, right?
I love that. Yes, for sure.
And then I also make sure, on the same vein, if I hear something good about somebody, I pass it on. So if I'm talking to my boss and he's like, oh, Jane did such a great job on this project, I'm going to go to your office and say, Jane, do you know what Kat just said about you? She said you were so awesome. That makes people's day.
It sure does.
I mean, and just something like that, it's so easy. It's so low effort. It absolutely do it. It just makes people's day. The other thing I really like to do is to show an interest in people. And this can look like showing an interest in their family, an interest in their hobbies. What I really like to do is show an interest in their professional development. And this can be done for anyone that you work with, both the people that you're managing, but also managing up too. And this can look like mentoring. It can look like giving them, solicited advice. Unsolicited may not always be the best idea.
Right.
But even things like for your boss, if you come across an article that you think they might be interested in, send them the link. If you hear about a conference that has a really interesting speaker they like, tell them about it. If you just read a book that you think was fantastic, pass it along. I mean, that sort of thing, people appreciate. It shows that you're interested in them, that you are invested in them, that you want to see them succeed. So just doing things like that are really kind of low-hanging fruit, but can have a big impact on the people that you're leading.
As an employee, to have a leader who does that shows intention and authenticity. And it just shows that you are so well intentioned to help them succeed, and that I can only imagine being in that role, that makes you want the company that you work for to succeed, because you're like, yes, we're in this together, and you're seen and you're heard and you're cared for. I think that's such a gift that you offer, Tiffanie, to your team, or just anybody that you've worked with, especially, with leading with enthusiasm. And so if you're listening today, pay attention to what Tiffanie said. You can rewind it back and listen, because I think, like you said, when we embrace this posture of enthusiasm or positivity, or however you want to phrase it, and you just exude that to your team, that just increases the productivity, and you work better. I don't know. It's just like a better experience for everyone all around, for sure. Well, I want to switch gears really quick here, Tiffanie, because you are working on a really cool resource we have coming out next month. Could you give us some insight as to what it is that you're crafting for our community as a resource for us?
Yes, I'm so excited about this, Jane, and thank you for asking me about it. So Here's what we're doing, or here's where the genesis of it came from. So the enemy is trying to scare us into not talking about Jesus, bottom line. Any opportunity that he can take to stop us from talking about Jesus. And in my experience, especially when I was a lawyer for an international law firm, a lot of people felt afraid to talk about Jesus in the workplace, particularly in the secular workplace and in the legal workplace, where we're always afraid of discrimination laws, and people are going to say like, oh, you're discriminating against me, or you're harassing me, that sort of thing. So what we are doing is we are putting together a video resource that answers the questions of what can you do? What does the law actually say. So the idea is to kind of nix that fear in the bud so that you know exactly what you can do, how you are protected. And we're going to answer questions like, can I share my testimony at work? Can I start a Bible study and use company resources like reserving a conference room? And what do I do if I'm asked to do something at work that is in conflict with my beliefs? So we're going to answer a bunch of questions like that. I'm going to give you some general guidelines and then some resources if you actually have a very specific issue that you need to talk to a lawyer about. And I hope that you'll be able to watch this video. It's not going to be hours upon hours. We're aiming for about 30 to 45 minutes. So I'm hoping you can watch this video and then feel empowered to embrace your faith in the workplace. And the great news is, for those of our listeners who are in America, we actually have a lot of protections here. We are very favored in that regard. And so I'm hoping that you are going to feel very empowered and free to embrace your faith in the workplace.
That's going to be an incredible resource. It is coming out in July. So be on the lookout, listeners, for the prompts on our website. I'm sure it'll be linked on our resource page, polishnetwork.org. Tiffanie, what a great conversation. I am so excited for this resource and just how it's going to help all of us combat those fears of how we can integrate our faith into our workspace. Time for a quick breather. During this break, we've got something special for you. Exciting ways to connect with the Polish Network. Stay tuned, though, because when we return, Tiffanie will be taking a spin in the Ask Me Anything hot seat, so don't move a muscle. Hey, friends! After a long winter and a challenging spring, it's time to turn up the volume on summer with the Polish Summer Mixtape Series. We're remixing our usual Polish podcast format to share with you the heart and the soul of the Polish Network through the voices of our inspiring community leaders. Tune in each week to meet phenomenal women from across the U.S. and be uplifted by scripture, encouraging devotionals, and their firsthand experiences leading within our community that will strike a chord and renew your heart and soul. If you've had a rough season, or you need a reminder that your work matters, or you're just looking for a community of ambitious women seeking to serve the Lord with everything that they've got, this series is for you. Tune in on July 3rd and discover the heart behind Polish Network and our chapters. Check it out on our YouTube channel. You can also listen at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Let's make this summer a hit together. Go to polishnetwork.org to learn more. Well, welcome back, friends, to the Polish Podcast. We hope you are enjoying our conversation today with our guest, Tiffanie Limbrick. But now it's time to add a dash of spontaneity and a sprinkle of fun to the show. It's time for Ask Me Anything. So, Tiffanie, this is how Ask Me Anything works. It's a chance for us to peel back the layers and get to know the woman behind the work, your quirks behind the expertise. So I've curated a few questions for you, and I'm just going to follow my curiosity to know more about you. Are you game?
I'm game. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Question 1. Considering your legal background, if you could argue a case in any fictional universe, think like Hogwarts or Middle Earth or Marvel or whatever universe you can think of, which one would you choose and why?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Fictional universe. Okay, I'm going to have to go with my favorite book. My favorite fictional book is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Classic, I know. Yeah, I am sure there's a case between Elizabeth and Darcy. Some kind of defamation case, absolutely a defamation case, I'm sure. But I think I would get a kick out of cross-examining Darcy, especially. Putting him on the stand would be excellent.
Oh my goodness.
And for the record, for anybody who wants to weigh in on the controversy of which Pride and Prejudice movie is the best, the correct answer is the BBC version with the original Colin. Yes. So that is the correct.
Colin Firth, right?
That's right. Yes.
That's right. Well, yes. Yes. Oh, that is fun. Well, thank you for instructing us and informing us on that. Oh, I love that. That went deep. I didn't know how deep that would go, but I love it. I love it. I knew you'd have a great answer for that one. Considering leadership in general, what's the most challenging leadership decision you've had to make, and what did you learn from it?
Ooh. I was the student body president in my undergrad years, and I am old enough that Facebook was launching when I was an undergrad. And at the time, it was very unknown, and at the time it was limited to only university students, and it was being launched individually on the universities. And my university was deciding, are we going to allow Facebook to be used by our campus? And what is it going to look like? How are we going to protect our students? And they were involving me very heavily in that decision process as the student body president. I was representing the students' opinion at the time. And it was a very difficult time because on one hand, I was very concerned about student safety. On the other hand, I was also very cognizant of freedom of speech concerns and students' desire to be on this platform. And how do we balance the two, right? How do we kind of hold those two things in tension? And it was a very challenging thing, especially for me. I mean, I was like 20, 21 at the time. I learned a lot about discernment in that process and gathering information from wise people and gathering a diverse points of view so that I could come to a decision that was uniquely mine. So instead of, because I feel like young people, or when you're a kid, you tend to adapt the views of the grown-ups in your life, whether it's parents or your teachers, or maybe it's a pastor or whomever, and you just adapt those as you probably should, right? But then as you start to grow up, you need to start challenging those, and in a wise way, in a discerning way, and start to learn how to adopt those ideas as your own, and being able to know what is a good idea, what's a bad idea, and figuring things out on your own. And so through that process, I started to learn how to do that. And spoiler, we did adopt Facebook. Shocker, right?
You're right.
But I insisted that we had mandatory trainings for all of the students on how to use it safely. And so we did that for at least the first year. I'm sure they didn't keep that up until Facebook was widely available, of course. But we had safety trainings to tell people things like, don't put your address online. Don't, share personal information,
right.
And to try and teach people how to use the stuff safely.
Yeah. I remember when Facebook launched too, at my university, and it was a whole new frontier back then. It looked completely different back then than it does today. Well, my final question for you, Tiffanie, in this segment is, in your experience, what qualities are most important for leaders in the legal profession, and how do you think you cultivate these traits?
Yes. So I think, I think our legal profession needs kindness. It is desperate for kindness. And I want to tell you a story. It just happened last week. So I had a friend, and I've known her for like 2 years, and she had come over to my house for a game night, and we were talking, and somebody just offhandedly made a remark about how I was a lawyer, and she stopped the room and she said, "What, you're a lawyer?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, how did you miss that?" And she was like, "I had no idea." And then she said, "I had no idea lawyers could be Christians." And I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is terrible. It is terrible for my profession that her perception of lawyers is so bad that she thought the principles of our faith are so inconsistent with the practice of law." And I think it's because so many, at least the perception of lawyers is that they do not approach people with the loving kindness that Jesus approached people. And I know that lawyers have to be zealous advocates for their clients, but I think there's a way to do that with kindness. And I think you can do that and be a successful lawyer. And I think you can do that because I feel like I was for years. And I think you can do that by not cussing at people, by not calling them names. And these are bare minimums, you know? Like,
yeah, I like that.
Low-hanging fruit to me.
Right.
But that happened to me on the regular. I mean, all the times. People called me demeaning things. The frequent one, little girl. Like, oh my goodness. You talk about setting me off. But I also think that, the original intent of a lawyer is to be an advocate. And you can be an advocate by presenting the facts in a persuasive way. That's our job. But you can do it in a kind way. And Jesus was an advocate. He is our advocate. He is our advocate before God. And you don't see him doing it in a way other than kind. You don't see him name calling people. You don't see him angry at people. Well, he flipped a couple tables, but that's okay.
Righteous anger.
But it's that loving kindness. And I think that we can do that. So I'm a big proponent of putting the civility back into the practice of law. I think you can do it. And I think the best lawyers do it. And I would encourage any Christian lawyers out there. Not only should you be the model behavior of that, you should demand that from the other people, not only in your workplace, but the person on the other side of the table. Just don't engage with them if they're not going to behave that way. And I think you can do that in a loving, kind way too. You know, there were very frequently, if somebody was yelling at me on the phone, I would just very professionally tell them, "I'm sorry, I am not going to have this conversation with you while you are behaving that way. Please call me when you are willing to speak to me in a professional manner." Hang up. That's it.
Yeah.
You know? And so I think that as lawyers, we can demand that level of professionalism, and we can model that level of professionalism.
No, that's so good, Tiffanie. Kindness all around. That I totally agree. Well, thank you so much, Tiffanie, for sharing just little bits more with us and our audience. And here's the thing, friends, we want you to be a part of the conversation too. So if you have just questions about leadership, or you're curious about future guests, or you just have questions that you just need to ask, go to our website at polishnetwork.org and submit your questions there. Be an MVP of the podcast. You'll get a mention and insight into your favorite guests in leadership development. Send those questions in today.
Are you ready to reignite your professional journey? This June, we're thrilled to release all the incredible videos from our first ever Boldly Conference in 2021, now available for everyone. Boldly is a one-of-a-kind women's conference. It empowers women in their faith and work, emphasizing your career as a dynamic creation of the Father. Whether you're building a business or managing an account, your work is a form of worship, and we're here to grow together. Visit polishnetwork.org and click on our resources page to access these inspiring talks from our 2021 archive. Hear from amazing speakers like Crystal Evans-Hurst, Jamie Ivey, Jess Connolly, Terry Igioma, Hosanna Wong, and more. Plus, get a sneak peek of Boldly 2024 with Kat Armstrong, Catherine Gates, and Joy Dahl, who will join us again this year. Don't miss out. Head to polishednetwork.org today to get a taste of the Boldly experience with our Boldly 2021 archive today.
What is a final piece of encouragement or advice for our listeners that they can take with them in just how they can lead with enthusiasm despite challenges that they face, or how can they bring their faith into their workplace as well?
I really want people to hear that it starts with you. It really does. I have learned the hard way that not taking care of yourself will impact every area of your life. It will lead to burnout. You will not perform well at work. You will be a bad manager. You will be a bad leader. It will not go well for you. So you have to take care of yourself. I spent a lot of money in therapy learning that. So there's some great advice.
Yep.
But really, you've got to take care of yourself and you've got to prioritize that. And it's not a spa weekend away. It is a daily practice, and you've got to prioritize it, right? You cannot pour from an empty cup. I know it's such a trite saying, but it's so true. And the other aspect of this, if you've got to make like a good excuse, sometimes I have to do this for myself to kind of like justify it, is you've got to model this behavior for the people in your life, right? So I have a 6-year-old I need to model this for, right? And it comes through in that. So when I model taking care of myself, he learns to take care of himself. And I'm starting to see that now. Like I model taking breaks when I'm overwhelmed. And then now he's starting to tell me, Mom, I need a break. This is too much. I'm overwhelmed. And I'm so glad that he's doing that, because I know that it's going to set him up for a better future because he's recognizing these things in himself. Whereas it took me over 30 years to figure it out and a lot of heartache, right?
Right.
But I really think that, to be able to lead enthusiastically, to have that gratitude, to be able to problem solve, to be able to pour into other people's lives, you have to start by being able to pour into yourself.
That's so good. So good, Tiffanie. Well, I have just really appreciated your perspective that you've shared with us today on leading with enthusiasm. And before we wrap up this episode, this is your chance to plug your Polished chapter, because you are one of our lovely chapter directors for Polished. And we just want to create awareness that we're out there. We know you co-facilitate one. Why did you choose to co-lead a group, and what would you say to someone who might be on the fence in joining one?
Yeah, so Polished chapters are such a fun way to meet other working women who are looking to just for other ways to embrace their faith in the workplace, or just to meet other working women who, are embracing their faith. And the great thing is there's no membership required. You come to the luncheons when they work for your schedule, and they're not always luncheons. It just depends on your local chapter. And my chapter in North Dallas, we happen to meet on the second Wednesday of every month from 12 to 1. And the majority of chapter meetings, regardless of where you are in the nation, they are typically structured in a way where we bring in a speaker. They're typically a professional woman or maybe somebody who's in vocational ministry, just depending on the topic. And we interview them for about 20 minutes on whatever the topic of the month is. It's typically following our lovely podcast so that we all get developed on this month's theme. And we have this great interview with this wonderful speaker. And so we're getting developed professionally. And then we spend about 10, 15, 20 minutes having a discussion with our friends at the table. And so we're getting to know each other. We're getting that community, and we're getting insights from each other. And we're also eating a good, yummy lunch, at least in our chapter. Some chapters meet over coffee. Some chapters meet over dinner. It just kind of depends what's going on in your local chapter. And it's just a quick 1 hour time to gather, talk about work, talk about God, and it's so awesome. Polished offers a lot of other great resources and opportunities. We have a Faith and Work conference. We've got collaboratories where you can do an intensive year-long leadership development. And I personally love Polished because of the community it offers, in addition to all these other great resources. So I encourage you to check it out. Reach out to me if you're in the North Dallas area. We've got several other chapters if you're not in North Dallas, in the Dallas area. I'd love to connect to you wherever you are.
Awesome. Well, Tiffanie, I really appreciate that. And yes, join a Polished chapter. We've got them popping up, not just in Dallas, but nationwide. What Tiffanie shared is a really good insight into what those different gatherings look like. Cincinnati, Ohio is where I'm at. We, I think, have a second one launching soon. But anyway, like it's popping up and you have an opportunity to launch one too. So Tiffanie, for those who are listening who may want to connect with you, whether to join a Polished chapter or just to learn more about the work that you do with RightNow Media or just in general, how can people connect with you?
Absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn pretty easily. Just remember that Tiffanie is spelled with an IE instead of a Y. I know, a little tricky. You can also find our chapter on Instagram. It's Polished with an ED, North Dallas. Or you can find me personally on Instagram at Tiff Limbrick. I share lots of great stuff about Polished and a few of the other volunteer activities I am in, and cute pictures of my son.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tiffanie. I so enjoyed this, and I'm looking forward to the resource we're launching next month. So awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Jane. This was great.
Tiffany's perspective on leading with enthusiasm, it's refreshing. As we wrap up this series, it's a good reminder for all of us to consider what we need to maintain a healthy outlook on our work. And my prayer for all of us is that we discover the best ways to take care of ourselves so we can lead others better. Do you have a different takeaway from today's conversation? If so, let me know. Share your thoughts for this episode on our Instagram post, or if you're watching on YouTube, in the comments below. Let's continue this dialogue on leading with enthusiasm. As we wrap up this episode, I want to express our heartfelt gratitude to everyone who plays a role in making the Polished Podcast a reality. The Polished Podcast is made possible in part by the generous support of Coca-Cola Consolidated. Thank you, Tiffanie Limbrick, for encouraging us to embrace leading with enthusiasm to create flourishing work environments for the people we lead. Be sure to check out our upcoming resource releasing in July that will help you integrate your faith into your work. To our loyal listeners, your unwavering support and your engagement drive us to deliver content that resonates and emboldens. Thank you, Polished Network, for creating a nurturing community where women in the workforce can thrive and connect. A big thank you to White Oak Christian Church for your partnership and contributions to the production of these episodes. And I think Tiffanie said it best. Leading with enthusiasm starts with you. So how are you showing up? Are you feeling burned out? Do you look forward to your work? Regardless of where you fall on this scale of enthusiasm, remember,
you have to take care of yourself.
Well, if you're seeking a supportive community for your faith and work journey, I'd love to encourage you to join us on social media and our YouTube channel. Stay updated with our latest content by liking, subscribing, and taking a moment to rate and review the Polished Podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Your engagement means a lot, and it helps us create content that's meaningful to you. But until next time, this is Jane Dorman signing off. Keep moving forward and stay emboldened.